Even Republicans are surprised at how radically US President Trump and his trusted advisor, Elon Musk, are fulfilling their election promises by restructuring the government and the state apparatus. Trump sees his cutback plans as a service to the American taxpayer, intended to help reduce what he sees as excessive bureaucracy in Washington. Trump claims he's ending the inefficiency and waste of taxpayers' money. But critics sense a secret agenda by the administration aimed at discrediting and weakening American institutions. Today we ask, Trump, Musk and the tech billionaires, is a coup happening in the US? Hello and welcome to the Point. Let me introduce today's panel. Annika Brockschmidt, a writer and US expert. Her bestseller, America's Religious Warriors, deals with the powerful political force of the religious right. And Brandon Bohrn, expert on US policy and foreign policy with the Bertelsmann Stiftung, that's a think tank here in Berlin. And Erik Kirschbaum, a writer and journalist who also reports for the Los Angeles Times. A very warm welcome to all of you. And Brandon, I want to start with you. A very simple question. What's happening?
Well, I mean, Trump's in a relatively unique position for any president. It's only happened one time in U.S. history that a president has had a pause between two administrations. And essentially, what he's done is he took that time to reflect on what went wrong in his first administration, what he wasn't able to get over the finish line. You can see within the last 3.5 weeks the speed at which some of these executive orders have come. It's just it's chaos. That's the word that I've heard used the most. But if you talk to any American at the moment, reducing red tape, reducing bureaucracy, those are good things. Mm-hmm. But the way in which it's being done, there are political motivations, apparently, if you look at some of the actions, the conflicts of interest that are there, and then the rule of law is simply being ignored.
That's the main concern, is it not?
Yeah, there's blatant lawlessness that we see. We basically see an executive branch that sees itself above the other two branches that are supposedly there to ensure that there are checks and balances on the executive's power. And we now see prominent members of the Trump administration openly stating that they don't see themselves bound, for example, by the courts. And, we have to see how this plays out. I don't think any of us know how it's going to go because there's just so much happening at the moment. But the speed and the destructiveness, I think, has even surpassed, I would say, the most pessimistic expectations.
Checks and balances. Famously controlling democracy and keeping democracy alive in the US. Are they being thrown out of the window right now?
Definitely it's challenging. I would call it disruption, not destruction. Destruction. I think Trump feels like he won a mandate to change things. He feels like it's his duty now. He has a promise to the voters. His first 4 years weren't as successful because he wasn't as well prepared. He was maybe surprised that he won. And I think, as Brendan mentioned, he's making up for that lost time now by trying to learn from all those mistakes and doing as much as he can. But I think the checks and balances are still there. There's still the Constitution. There's a Supreme Court up there that will stop anything unconstitutional. The Senate and the Congress are supposed to be a check and balance as well. Right now, the Republican-dominated Senate and Congress are not really challenging Trump. They seem to be a bit afraid of him at the moment, afraid of primary challenges that could make them lose their job. But things change in Washington. 2 years is the next midterm election, and it could be a completely different story. And Trump knows his window is small. He might only have 2 years to get through as much as he wants.
Now, but we just heard, you said, the checks and balances that are still in place. But, for example, we just heard from, I believe, J.D. Vance, who said that the courts are not there to countermand the actions of the government. That's exactly what they're there for. So I ask you again, is this a threat to the system of checks and balances?
I would say absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at those comments, and J.D. Vance has also said, okay, the judges have decided, let them try to enforce it. Mm-hmm.
channeling Andrew Jackson, by the way.
Absolutely.
That's where we're going back to.
Absolutely. So, I think the issue is what we've seen is there's not a pathway to follow the law. It's challenging the law outright and seeing what sticks. Because as we're seeing, following the law takes time. It's much quicker if you don't. And by the time the courts are reacting, the damage is done. I think that's one of the issues at the moment. Also, if you don't follow the law, what we've seen is the consequences of not doing so are actually not that serious. I mean, we're talking about fines in some way, political shame that could come with some of these actions, but the reality is that for certain individuals, Elon Musk in particular, if you don't follow the law and a financial burden comes, he's pretty well positioned to take care of it.
Well, he doesn't care, really, yeah.
But hold on, I mean, the most important court is the court of public opinion, and that's the court that Trump loves. And if these things really look like a takeover, like some people in Europe are worried of a hostile takeover, there's gonna be a whiplash, and Trump will feel that in the next elections. His popularity will go down. So I'm optimistic. I believe the Constitution is still working. I believe the checks and balances are working, and I think the media is a very important check on things that Trump are doing. And we're reading in detail about all these things that are going on. It's not like it's happening in secret. I mean, and Musk has admitted he's made mistakes, and he's going to correct them. So. It's only been 3 weeks. I think we should give him at least 100 days.
But at the same time, we see the administration, and of course, administration's relationship to media can be frosty at times. We've also seen that under Biden. However, this administration is openly threatening journalists, is removing journalists they don't like from the offices that they've had, making it harder to report on this. We have seen some excellent reporting, that's true. However, I think, because you mentioned the court of public opinion, I think one of the reasons, and we've seen this in, I think there was a CNN report on some of the protesters who are now going out onto the street to protest. And they were asked, why do you think there's fewer people protesting now on it? And one of them said, I think people also are scared. This is not a regular administration. This is an administration that has openly threatened to use the American military against protesters. So I think that's also something we can't, we can't forget when looking at the response from the public. And that's why I think we should be careful to say, oh, we'll just leave it to, public opinion will change. Because the question is, if it changes and when it changes, will it matter?
There's one name that has been mentioned twice already, and that's the name of Elon Musk. Donald Trump's new US government has radically realigned the political system of the United States, and the impact is immediate. But billionaire Elon Musk plays a central role in this.
Elon Musk, richest man in the world. Close confidant of US President Trump and now also head of a newly established government agency called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE for short. Musk and his team promised to radically downsize the state apparatus and make it more efficient.
Some of the things that we found, which are shocking, billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important, and that's one of the reasons I got elected.
Opponents suspect that Trump is primarily concerned with the political restructuring of the state apparatus. They criticize the fact that Musk and his team are mainly acting against authorities that don't align with Trump. Another critique, Musk's employees have access to sensitive CIA data used by financial authorities without it being clear what they need access for. Musk can weigh up potential conflicts of interest with his own companies as he sees fit. Will Musk and DOGE become a risk to US national security and US democracy?
Who's more dangerous, Musk or Trump?
I think that question, dangerous, I don't see either as dangerous. I think Trump was elected with this mandate, and he's doing many things he promised to do. And Musk is sort of carrying out his wishes. And I think Musk will be around as long as he's doing what Trump wants. And Trump is following what he's doing. Musk says he's reporting to Trump regularly. He's got an office in the White House. This fear, sometimes I hear abroad that he's not elected and all this and that. He's serving a president, and he's doing what the president wants. And he'll keep doing that as long as he does what Trump wants. They had a falling out 8 years ago in another body advisory panel. they'll probably have a falling out at some point. But at the moment, I think Musk is doing what Trump wants. And a lot of Americans, I was in the U.S. last 2 weeks, a lot of Americans like the idea of, as you mentioned, cutting the red tape, cutting the size of the government. The government is bloated over the last century, and there's plenty of room for cuts.
Let's go through what Musk has done or wants to do. Let's start with USAID. That is creating a huge opportunity, for example, for China to step into that gap, if you will. Is that dangerous?
No, I think it's counterproductive to this reset in U.S. strategic foreign policy. So, yesterday Pete Hegseth mentioned the Asia-Pacific region is our focus. The primary mission of USAID is to, of course, help people in need, right? A secondary goal is to provide is American influence. It's a great example of American soft power. And if the United States retreats, that creates a vacuum that then China can exploit. We know that China is already in touch with Vietnam, the Philippines, Nepal, Cambodia about filling the gap created by USAID not being there. So it's actually counterproductive, I find. Another
big part of his cutting down is actually looking at the FBI and in a kind of vindictive way, punishing everyone who has been part of investigations against him or his supporters, the January 6th crew that was in jail. What effect will that have?
I mean, I think we're already seeing the effects. Jacob Chansley, I think maybe most or better known as the so-called QAnon shaman, the guy with the horns from January 6th. He tweeted out right after he was pardoned, "Thank you, President Trump. I'm now going to go buy some guns." And so what you have now is just with the pardons, and this is not even starting with the FBI, but just with pardoning 1,500 people who were charged and convicted for their role in the storming of the Capitol, is you have now rewarded political violence against the heart chamber of American democracy. You are signaling to your supporters, if you do political violence that aligns with my political project, I will not only protect you, I will reward you. I will make you into heroes. We will call you martyrs, and we will make sure that you don't have to worry about the consequences. And the purge at the FBI, as you just said, this is not just, that would be scandalous enough. This is like, we are so beyond Watergate territory that I think Nixon's probably laughing in his grave. But what we're seeing is that everybody who had anything to do, any FBI agent who had anything to do with the roughly 1,000 cases, that's the biggest caseload in the history of the FBI. That means roughly 3/4 of the whole FBI were involved in that, are now under review. And this sends a clear message to law enforcement, which is supposed to be independent, that you now serve at the mercy of the president.
Another thing, go on.
Oh, just well said. I mean, we have individuals on lists. People are, I agree completely.
It sounds properly Stalinist, does it not?
It does. I mean, I think something else is, we're focusing on DOJ. There are other agencies that are also under review. For example, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There are clear conflicts of interest also with a look to. I mean, we talk about transparency. This is a body that is there to provide oversight to digital payment systems. These are markets that both Trump and Musk are entering. Trump with his cryptocurrency, and Musk, he'd like to expand X into a digital payment service as well. So they're the ones who are now overseeing this body that oversees this sector that they want to get into. I mean, that doesn't sound right.
Not only that, because now Musk employees apparently have access to the central financial data of the whole country and the Treasury. Conflict of interest would be a mild way to describe this, right?
Well, we're reading about this in the newspapers, and we're following it. So, and Musk has said we've made mistakes. So obviously that was a mistake, and there's been a reaction. The Treasury officer who was fired for resisting that. I mean, that's been in every newspaper in the United States. So people are following this, and they are making mistakes. And unfortunately, we're finding out about it. And I think Trump realizes that if he goes too far, there's going to be a boomerang. There's going to be a reaction. I mean, there's a lot of Americans who voted for Trump, not out of enthusiasm, but they thought the country needs this. And if Trump goes too far, and if he spends too much time relitigating January 6th, it's going to hurt him. He found that out in the 22 midterm elections. Nobody wanted to hear about it anymore. And if he spends a lot of time trying to clean out the FBI and the Department of Justice, it's going to hurt him. And he's not going to do well in the midterms. Republicans are going to probably pay the price for that. So Trump realizes this court of public opinion. He's got to do well in that, and if he's going to spend a lot of time looking back, he's probably going to have to pay a price.
Let's have a look at the kind of resistance that you just mentioned that will come at some stage, where it could come from. Let's start with the Republican Party. How long is the Republican Party that is pretty much behind Trump at the moment, but there are also lots of moderates there? How long is the Republican Party going to play this game?
Well, I think at the moment, as you mentioned rightly, Eric, that Republicans are in line with the agenda. They're relinquishing their powers in many ways to the executive because they agree with the agenda. We'll see how long that lasts. So I agree with that in particular. I think the actions of DOGE tie into something a bit larger. From my conversations, DOGE and the actions taking place in Washington are sort of secondary to this large bill that's going to come later in the year, the tax cuts that will surpass what we saw in 2017. If we include tax cuts, the deficit goes up. This is an attempt to bring the deficit down. There are fiscally conservative Republicans in Congress who will take issue. So there are some checks.
So from that corner, you think the resistance will originate? Inside the
maybe not from them, but I think there are segments of the Republican Party who do have their interests, who do have their own interests, and they'll make sure that they represent them.
Let's talk about the Democrats then. Where are they?
That's a good question. I think they're licking their wounds still. I think I have the feeling in the United States right now, Democrats aren't really trusted. The whole Joe Biden thing, people kind of concealing his health problems, and then the whole way Kamala was sort of anointed without a real proper primary. I think that rubbed a lot of people who lean toward voting toward the Democrats the wrong way. And I think they're in the wilderness right now, even though they're kind of debating, we only lost by 2 points. Did we really get wiped out, or was it a close call? And so there's this internal struggle going on. There's also the woke side of the Democratic Party, the progressive side. Are they going to become lambs and be quiet and let the conservative wing of the Democrats run the show again, where the Democrats have a better chance of winning in 4 years? All these things this debate still has to happen in the Democratic Party. They haven't really got there yet.
What kind of responsibility do the Democrats have to shoulder for the situation that the country is in right now and this rather clear loss they had to take?
Well, I think they have a responsibility not just to their own base, but also to every single American who belongs to a marginalized group whose life and existence is now under direct attack from this government. So I think that's why there's been a lot of discontent from their own base with the way that Democrats have been reacting with this sort of fecklessness almost that they've displayed in the last, it's gotten a bit better within the last couple of days, but still, considering what they're faced with, this is a very tepid reaction to something that, the speed of what's happening, yes, that was a surprise, but not the fact that it is happening.
If I may,
yes, please
add one more detail. I think, I have members of my family that are ardent Trump supporters, and I think as you rightly said, in the lead up to the election last year, the Democrats focused primarily on what was wrong with Trump. I think if to counteract what we saw in the election just in November, the Democrats just have to do better. The Democrats have to have a clear agenda that speaks to a greater portion of the American public. That's the mission ahead of the midterms in 2 years.
I'd like to have another look at the external consequences that the world is actually facing. Now, one of the best-known examples of Musk's cutbacks is USAID. We spoke about this earlier. That's the government agency for international development aid, established by Kennedy in 1961. Its goal was to counter the growing influence of the Soviet Union through foreign aid.
Medical aid in Africa, reconstructing Afghanistan, demining in Cambodia. The global range of USAID's aid measures is vast. Now all of this could be dismantled. The plan, shrinking the agency from 10,000 to 300 employees and integrating it into the US State Department under Marco Rubio. The global consequences are already serious. Many aid programs were discontinued overnight. In 2023, 6 of the 10 countries that received the most aid were from Africa. A famine early warning system has now been shut down as a result. Last year, around $50 billion were invested in USAID development aid projects, not even 0.5% of total government spending. For advocates, USAID was the US strongest soft power in the world. Elon Musk, on the other hand, has said USAID is a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America and a criminal organization. How dramatic are the global consequences of Trump's plans to cut USAID?
Let's have a look at how dramatic the consequences are globally, not just for that, but the whole change. Does the West need to reform completely to adjust to that?
I mean, Pete Hegseth made it very clear, I think it was yesterday when, I'm paraphrasing, but only mildly, when he said the security of Europe is not the US's prime concern, which, you know, it hasn't been for a while, but saying it out loud as the new defense minister clearly sets a statement.
That's a watershed.
Yeah, and it also sets a tone for what we can expect within NATO. And Trump has repeatedly made comments in the run-up to the election that were either direct attacks against NATO allies, the whole Greenland thing, Denmark, you know, that's also an unconscionable break of any diplomatic rules, of anything that goes within NATO. And so I think we're really in uncharted territory here.
I think it's important to remember it's not just Trump, it's a lot of Americans think, why are we spending so much money abroad? Why is the United States spending 70% of the defense for Ukraine? Why aren't Europeans doing that? And USAID is similar. Not a lot of Americans probably knew what USAID was a month ago, and now they do. But it's another one of these things where Americans are spending billions of dollars abroad. And there's a lot of problems in the United States with homelessness, with homeless veterans, with all kinds of problems in the U.S. And a lot of the Republican voters for a long time now have been talking about, why are we doing this? And Trump latched onto that, and Trump has heated that up. And so this is not really a surprise for people in the Midwest and a lot of red states. They're happy with these steps that Trump is doing.
Would you agree?
I think there are certainly segments of the U.S. population that agree with that sentiment. So no, that's absolutely true. But we know that it's very much a divided country, and there are certainly individuals who don't agree with it. So it's that's how it is.
So I would like to have a look in your collective crystal balls. Trump is stepping on lots of people's toes right now, and that group of people will increase over time. Will there be resistance, and who will be those that actually resist?
Yeah, there's going to be resistance. I mean, the Democrats are going to regroup at some point. I mean, one leading Democrat, Gavin Newsom in California, has an awkward situation. He needs money from the federal government because of the fire, so he can't be the mouthpiece against Trump that he would probably like to be. But that'll change, and there'll be elections coming up, and the Democrats will probably do better. There's always a swing in the pendulum. And the midterms, if they go bad for Trump, I think you'll see his popularity decline pretty fast, and there'll be rebellions. And I think the media is a very important guardrail in the United States, and these things will happen. I mean, it's a democracy, and Trump is a challenge to it, but there's been other American presidents like Franklin Roosevelt who made a grab for power, and the courts came back. And I'm optimistic that that there'll be limits on Trump, and we'll see those. And one other thing, inflation is a big issue in the United States right now, today, and Trump promised to roll back inflation. He's already failing at that. And it's not going to take long for Americans to be really annoyed by the price of eggs and gasoline.
Do you share that optimism?
To a certain extent. I think it largely depends on the policies that are taking place. What is the impact on the American public? The tariff policy at the moment, almost all analyses that you see about this policy is we're going to have increases to consumer prices in the United States. We could see that play out in the 2026 midterms as well.
I think it depends on whether Democrats and independent media can manage to communicate clearly how dire the situation for the democracy is and what it means specifically for the lives of everyday Americans, because that's the key that you need for public resistance.
There would be so much more to discuss. We're running out of time. Thank you very much to my panel. That's it for this edition of To The Point. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and please join the conversation. If you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment below from me and the whole team. Many thanks for watching.